No sleeper seats, that's a mattress. No sleeper seats, that's a mattress.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Showtime with Shannon. Man, I'm so excited about this. This has been kind of a dream of mine. I love movies. I've loved movies for a long time, and I've always kind of wanted to do something like this. I've always wanted to run my own podcast talking about movies. Fortunately, Blaze Radio has given me the opportunity to produce my own podcast now. What is this podcast really going to be about? Well, this podcast, I'm going to be going over any important movie news in the movie industry, so maybe upcoming trailers. And then I'm going to be discussing some of the latest movies I've seen. I'll only do 2 an episode max, and these movies are going to range from what's new in theaters, like Tenet. There's not a lot new in theaters right now if you've been keeping up with everything, but anything new in theaters or on any streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, HBO, anything like that. So for the first episode, I decided I was going to talk about 2 movies. First one being Tenet, which I'm very excited to talk about that. I have a lot of opinions on that. And then I'll also be talking about The Devil All the Time, a new Netflix film directed by Antonio Campos. I have a lot of thoughts on both of these, but I should probably explain how I'm going to talk about them. So with Tenet, I'm not going to do spoilers. I'm not going to talk about any spoilers with the movies because I know this is a movie that a lot of people really want to see, but unfortunately, due to Christopher Nolan forcing people to go to theaters, a lot of people aren't able to go to these theaters. They can't put themselves at risk like that. And I can't blame you, If you can't go see it, if you're going to put yourself at risk, don't go. Don't go. It's not worth your own health and safety. Just wait for this to come out on VOD, on digital. The Devil All the Time, however, though, I'm going to be spoiling a lot of it because in order to really talk about that one, I really have to get into the story of it. Tenet's not so much that I can be pretty vague in general talking about it and really still give my thoughts on it, because with Tenet, it's not so much, for me at least, Tenet isn't so focused on the story of the movie. It's more about kind of the set pieces, the action, and like the idea of the movie, But meanwhile, The Devil All the Time is all about, you have to like look in the nuances of what the director Antonio Campos is really talking about. So with that being said, let's get into Tenet. Man, going to the movies in 2020 is a weird experience. Like, oh my goodness, I couldn't get over it the whole time. I know for a lot of people how important going to the movies is for some people. Like, I'm personally that way. We used to go to movies all the time. It's just a nice escape, Going for 2 hours and just kind of forget about everything around you. Just enjoy a movie. Maybe you have a bad week or something like that, and then you just go to the movies and you have a good time. And a lot of people, they don't have that escape anymore, and I really feel for that. But man, it was so bizarre going in there. So first off, they have so many signs all over the place. I went to an AMC. I went to the local AMC by me that I used to work at. And so they had like face guards all over the place, like big plastic shields separating you and the employees. They don't tear your ticket anymore. They like just write on it. I must have only seen 10 other people. And I was in the IMAX. And again, I had worked there for a long time. So the only time I've ever seen the IMAX that empty is obviously like after the showing ends. And like I'm cleaning it up and maybe there's like 2 or 3 people still there just watching the credits, just to do it, just because they're bored and waiting for everyone else to leave. But to be in the theater watching a movie with, I think maybe, gosh, I want to say there was maybe 7 other people with me in the IMAX theater, which seats like almost like 150 people, and it was completely empty. It was surreal. I've never experienced that, especially I went and saw it at like 3 or 4 o'clock on like a Friday afternoon. Nobody was there. I've never been used to that. My time working at AMC, like 3 o'clock was a nightmare on Fridays because that's when the Dolby screens, and the Dolby seats like 150 people almost constantly. So for me to go in there and there was like 4 or 5 other people with me, it was so bizarre. But I kind of really enjoyed it. I kind of liked it, if it really did feel like it was just me just sitting there seeing Tenet. It was weird because I've heard nothing from AMC except from my former managers who I talked to still. I've heard nothing out of AMC about their new procedures or things like that, which is kind of odd to me. On one hand, I understand that a lot of people, even if they have a lot of CDC approved guidelines, they're still not going to go because it's just too risky. And again, that's something that I completely respect and I think most people should do. But I mean, they have so many precautions set up. There's like hand wipes all over the place. So whenever you use something, you can wipe your hands and then wipe down whatever you use, like for the soda fountain machines. So it felt strange to me while I was there. I was like, why isn't AMC pushing this more? Like, why aren't they trying to tell people it's safe? Like, their guidelines are CDC approved. In theory, they should be safe, but they're not bringing anyone in. I'm not seeing this anywhere on social media. I'm not seeing any ads anywhere on YouTube, on TV. So I was like, why aren't they pushing this? And then before the movie starts, I don't know if you guys remember when you go to the movies, it feels like forever now. They do like the little thing, like they're like, thank you for coming to the movie. There's like the exits are going to be over there. You know, they do that. And after that played, they had another one talking about all of the precautions they're doing. And I couldn't help while I was watching this but think, why aren't you putting this everywhere? Why are you not advertising to people that, hey, we're safe, we are safe, you can come to go see our movies? I don't understand. I don't understand why they're so confused why no one's coming, but they're not pushing these. They're not out there like advertising the fact that they're clean, that they're safe, that they have CDC approved guidelines. I don't understand it. Would I say it's worth going to the movies right now? Probably not. But again, this is a personal choice kind of thing. I'd say if you aren't at risk and you don't stand to put anyone else at risk by going to the movies, then I'd consider it. I'd consider going to the movies to go see Tenet, or don't go to the movies to see New Mutants. That's an awful movie. But if you really are, if it's just you and you're not going to put anyone else at risk, including yourself or your family members at home, I'd say it's personal. I can't in good faith tell people to go to the movies because obviously with the entire pandemic going on, it's hard to say to do anything really because I don't know what's going to happen the next day or what might happen to you. So with that out of the way though, I should probably talk about the movie.
All I have for you is a word. Tenet. It'll open the right doors, some of the wrong ones too. Use it carefully.
So Tenet is the latest film directed by Christopher Nolan. Came out this year in 2020. It's basically a movie about an unnamed CIA operative who is played by John David Washington. He's known as the protagonist. It's strange, kind of on the nose, but I'm going to get more into that in a little bit because I think a lot of the writing is on the nose because, I mean, it is Christopher Nolan. Again, I'm going to get into that a little bit. He's recruited by this weird, shady underground organization known as Tenet to try to stop this Russian oligarch, Andrei Sator. He's this crazy guy who has managed to find a way to invert time. And it is just as strange as that sounds. The entire movie, well, first off, I think it was a great movie. I thought the movie was pretty great. But it is a very interesting, very, very interesting movie. First off, I did see this in the way that Christopher Nolan intended. I saw this in an IMAX. But again, this is a pretty good movie, but I still don't understand, why does this have to be in theaters? I feel like if they released this movie digitally, oh my gosh, this would be huge. This would make millions. This would break records. But for whatever reason, I mean, I get it. Christopher Nolan's a cinema purist, kind of like me. He's like, I want my movies shown in the theaters, and I get that. I like to see my movies in the theaters. I would have preferred to see The Devil all the time in theaters as well, along with a bunch of other movies that came out on Netflix this year. But that's simply not a luxury that we have right now. And I don't understand why he has to be so strict about this. Why this is like a make or break for him. It's like, it has to be in theaters. We have to put it out in theaters. There's no exception. When he's losing money by doing this, and the theater experience doesn't necessarily enhance it. And I'm going to get into that in just a second, because I do have a couple problems with this movie. And the biggest problem with this is the sound mixing. I thought the sound mixing was really poor. So if you don't understand what sound mixing is, let me take you to an example of it in the movie The Social Network. In The Social Network, there's a scene where two characters are in a club talking about business, basically. And during this, they're in a club. The music is incredibly loud. So you're trying your hardest to make out what he's saying. You can barely hear what the characters are saying because the music is so loud. So when you're mixing, you want to make sure that you're balancing your audio. You're balancing, okay, I want the music to be this loud, but I also want the audio to be this loud where it's realistic enough that, of course, the music is going to be blaring at a club, but you're still able to make out everything that the characters are saying, even barely, which is the point. He wants you to feel like you're in the club, so you're like kind of straining to understand what he's saying, similar to how the characters are trying to understand each other. That's an example of mixing done pretty well, in my opinion. Where this movie fails is there's a lot of scenes of characters just talking to each other, and whether it be the soundtrack or the audio or like the sound effects that they're using, like gunshots or explosions are going off, where you just can't understand a word they're saying. There's a scene, I won't get into spoilers of what's happening, but they're trying to plan something. Robert Pattinson and John David Washington are planning something with another character. The soundtrack, which I like the soundtrack a lot, is just too loud. First off, I'm already struggling to understand them enough because Robert Pattinson's voice, as wonderful as it sounds, has a very thick British accent to it. So it's a little bit difficult just off that alone to make out some things that he's saying. But stack that with the very loud soundtrack and the very quiet dialogue, it makes it that much harder to understand it. And there are characters in this, like, for example, the villain, Andrea. Am I saying his name right? Andre? I think it's Andre. I don't know why I'm saying Andrea. The villain's name is Andre, and he has an incredibly thick, like, Russian accent. I'm pretty positive it's like a Russian accent. And I mean, there's some scenes where he's like yelling and he's like screaming things at people, and I'm trying my hardest to make out what he's saying, but I mean, I'm struggling here. And ironically, this is a thing that will be solved if they released it digitally, because I could just have subtitles. I mean, this brought it down quite a lot for me. The mixing was bad. If I can't understand like key dialogue, that's a big issue for me. If I can't understand key things that are being said that I need to understand for the plot, I mean, I don't know what you want me to do. I don't know how I'm supposed to continue watching the scene and not just be really confused. It's a big problem for me, and it brought it down a lot. But again, ironically, this isn't a problem if you release it digitally and you watch it with subtitles, because everything is, you can just read what they're saying. If you have no idea what they're saying, which in quite a few scenes, it is almost unintelligible. It is almost unintelligible. I have no idea what they were saying in some scenes. I really don't. Maybe it's because I saw it in the IMAX. I don't know, but I was reading it from a couple other reviews too. I've been listening to a couple other people talking about it. I've been reading a few reviews, and I've noticed that a lot of people have said the same thing, that there's a lot of scenes where it's really hard to understand what they're saying. The other issue I had with this movie, and it's pretty small, is the dialogue. I mean, the acting was fine. I thought a lot of, especially the blocking, like their performance, the way that they're moving, especially when they're supposed to be on a different plane of time. They're supposed to be going backwards into time. The way that they're running looks like very strange. Like, it's just off enough that you're looking at it and you're like, that looks so weird. And that's perfect. That's exactly how it should look. I mean, you're running backwards through time. It shouldn't look natural because we can't perceive that. So I appreciated that a lot of the physical performances. But a lot of the dialogue was kind of, I wrote it down. I have in my notes right here. It was whack, which is not a great way to describe it, to be quite frank. It wasn't terrible. It was not bad. It was just very cliche. I think that's the way I want to put it. Because this movie feels a lot like a Bond Mission Impossible type movie, which I wasn't expecting. I didn't know what to expect coming into this movie in the first place, but I wasn't expecting a spy thriller, which after reading a lot of, like watching the trailers afterwards and seeing the plot synopsis, I mean, if I had read them, yeah, I would have definitely known what I was getting into, but I really didn't, which I enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed not knowing what I was getting into. It made it a lot more fun. But again, a lot of the dialogue was super on the nose and cheesy. Like, again, the villain is kind of super corny. He has a line in the movie where he goes, "I am a tiger," or something really stupid like that, and it's hilarious. It was hilarious. Again, it's like, it felt like a Bond movie. Like, everyone was super like slick and really cool sounding. Like John David Washington especially, he's very calm, he's cool, he's collected. And he always is like, he's witty, He always has a response. He always has like a witty remark for somebody. It felt a lot like a spy movie, and I like that a lot. I especially like John David Washington in this. I thought he was pretty great. All the other characters are pretty good. Robert Pattinson's character I thought was interesting. I liked him in terms of, again, this being a spy movie. He was kind of like the cool, witty side character. It's like sidekick almost. But he knew a lot more than he was letting on, and I like that. I like that kind of spy movie kind of element to it. Again, this is a very minor complaint with just some of the lines that he says. Like, again, I mentioned it earlier. John David Washington is called the protagonist, and in multiple times he refers to himself. He's like, "Well, I'm the protagonist, so I have to know what's going on." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds kind of lame." I was like, "Oh, that sounds a little lame." I'm not gonna lie. It's not bad. It's not something that's gonna take you out of it. If it were trying to be a more like serious Christopher Nolan film, thinking along the lines like Memento or The Prestige, something like that, if there were these really like cheesy, corny lines, it'd take me out of it. But with what Tenet is, it works pretty well. So, with all the negatives out of the way, let's get into the positives. What did I like about this movie? I liked a lot about this movie. I'll start with the best thing about it, which is the action. Dang, they have some crazy, crazy action scenes in this movie. Obviously, when you have a concept as interesting as certain objects or even people in some scenes are able to move backwards through time, you immediately open up the door to the craziest scenarios possible. And there's a lot of setups and payoffs that while you're watching the movie, he'll show you something and you'll be like, okay, what is this? This is clearly going to be important. I have to remember this. And then like later in the movie, it'll come back and you're like, oh my gosh, but that was from there. And that was pretty cool. But these action scenes, man, they were really impressive. I think obviously the one that I think has gotten the most notoriety, if you've read about it, is when they crash a Boeing 747 into an airplane hangar. That scene was pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie. Just full disclosure, that was a really cool scene. The way that he just blows up a 747. Like, what the hell, Christopher Nolan? What are you doing? You're crazy. But again, I mean, the action scenes, the set pieces, and the thing I respect the most about Christopher Nolan in this movie is it's clear that he made this entire movie just around this concept. And it works. I mean, this concept absolutely opens up so many interesting avenues for him to play around with. It's so cool. Again, I really like that. And then I need to talk about the editing, both visual and sound editing. Man, the editing and the sound was so cool because there's times where we're in the point of view of somebody who's going backwards through time. And all of the sounds are reversed. Like even the smallest things, like birds, like chirping is like inverted. Everything is inverted. Even like the gunshots, they're inverted. Like it sounds like the bullets coming back through it. It's just an incredibly interesting idea. And the sound editing needed to be perfect. And I think it was. I think the sound editing for the most part was pretty terrific. I don't think there was no noticeably bad sound effects, and all the sound design. I mean, the movie just sounds really cool. And also the visual editing. I mean, the way that they're able to kind of put both of these things on the same plane. I feel like this movie is going to win a lot of technical awards at the Oscars, if the Oscars happens at all. I don't know what's happening with the Oscars, but this is going to win a lot of technical awards in my opinion, because that editing, I mean, it has to be so difficult to record people going backwards. So technically they're not going backwards. We're just perceiving them going backwards. So I'm perceiving that the way they filmed it is when people are running forward, they just reverse it in editing. And then it's so impressive to me that they're able to like transpose that video of people walking backwards and perfectly match it up with people running in what we perceive as normal time, as they're just running forward, going to do their things, and then you look right next to them, and there's people going backwards. It looks really strange, but it works really well. And again, this is where I've got to give a lot of credit to the acting, because everybody sells this, that there's two planes of time coexisting, people going forward in time and people going backwards through time, and that they're happening at the same time and people are seeing it. And everyone is incredibly convincing. And so again, I just got to give that a ton of credit. And the last thing I want to talk about is this soundtrack. Oh man, this soundtrack was so good. This was made by the same guy who did the Black Panther soundtrack. His name is Ludwig Göransson. I don't remember much of the Black Panther soundtrack. I don't remember being exceptional, but I thought this was an incredibly fitting and really good soundtrack. I mean, there was one scene during the movie where they're planning, I'm not where they're planning the heist, they're doing the heist. And the soundtrack kicks in and I was like, oh, I literally stopped while I was watching it. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is terrific. This is really good. I took notice of it immediately. And again, kind of on a funny note, during that exact, so I don't know if you're unaware, Travis Scott worked with Christopher Nolan to make a song for this movie called The Plan. In that song, he actually samples one of the songs off the soundtrack called Trucks in Place. He samples part of that song, and I didn't realize that at first. I only realized it after I saw the movie and I was listening to the soundtrack and that song by Travis Scott. While I was in the movie, I swear I heard that Travis Scott humming. If you've heard a Travis Scott song before, I'm sure you know what I mean, like his auto-tune humming. While I was watching, I was like, oh my God, was that Travis Scott? Was that Travis Scott? And I freaked out for a second. I was like, what the hell did I just hear? And sure enough, after the movie, I go back and I listen to that I find the song in the soundtrack from that scene and I start listening to it. And sure enough, yeah, I wasn't crazy. There was Travis Scott. There he was humming away. And it was hilarious to me to hear Travis Scott's hum during a Christopher Nolan movie in my first movie back in 2020. And that's kind of how I feel about this whole movie. I had a lot of fun watching this. I didn't really predict a lot of where this was going. There were some scenes where, again, I was talking about those setups and payoffs, where I saw something and I immediately was like, okay, I have an idea of what this is. And a few of them I was right about, but it is a fun movie. It's a movie that's a lot of fun, and I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy this once it comes out on VOD, which I hope for the sake of this movie is soon. Once this movie gets to VOD, it's going to make millions. It's going to make hundreds of millions easily. If they charge, $25 for renting this movie for a night, I know so many people are going to rent this movie, and a lot of people are going to enjoy it, and I'm glad. This is a good movie, and I think a lot of people really should go see this. But they shouldn't go see it the way it is, because obviously it is not worth risking your own health and safety going to the theaters right now. My final thoughts on it, it was good. Good time. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Again, the mixing really held this movie back for me. I feel like it'll probably go up when I see it again digitally because I'll have subtitles and I'll be able to understand some of those key points that I still missed. It's not like the mixing is going to be fixed once it comes out on VOD. It's just going to be, I'm going to be able to understand what they're saying. This is not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. It is just not worth risking your own health and safety over going to see. All right. So with Tenet being out of the way, let's get into our next movie, which is The Devil All the Time.
Happy birthday,
Happy birthday, honey.
Happy birthday to you.
Well, this was your daddy's. Brought back from the war. Figure it's time to pass it on.
I didn't know anything about this movie coming into it. I've never seen a movie from the director, Antonio Campos. I know a lot of people who really like his work, and he's got a bit of hype around him. I've never seen anything from him, though. So this is my first film, and I'm sure for a lot of people this is their first experience with Antonio Campos. So The Devil All the Time is a psychological thriller that examines the themes of evil, religion, and abuse of power in a rural, small-town America set in the 1950s. So I'm sure for a lot of people, the thing that drew people into this, and for me especially, was this cast. I mean, my goodness, this cast is stacked. We have Tom Holland, Bill Skarsgård, Jason Clarke, Sebastian Stan, Robert Pattinson, and Riley Keough. And before I get into everyone else, I thought the acting was great. This cast really brought their A game. I thought everyone did terrific. But I want to talk about Robert Pattinson first off, because, man, this guy has so much range. It's unbelievable. Even if you just look at Tenet and this, I mean, he's able to go from a witty, charismatic, lighthearted, lovable sidekick kind of character to this slimy, disgusting, evil Southern pastor. And he has this thick Southern drawl. I mean, it's fantastic, just that. But then, I mean, if you look at some of his other movies, like him in The Lighthouse, he has this like old-timey, I can't even place the accent, but he's like sounds like a sailor. And then even Good Time. I mean, Good Time, he sounds like he's lived in Queens his entire life. He has so much range. It's unbelievable. And it makes me so sad that a lot of people still associate Robert Pattinson as he's just the guy from Twilight. We need to move past this. Robert Pattinson is an incredible actor. He's one of the best actors in Hollywood right now. He's so much more than just the guy from Twilight. And I think a lot of people need to move past this stereotype of him and really give him a chance because he's a fantastic actor. Anyway, Robert Pattinson fangirl aside, let's get into the actual movie. So I knew nothing about this movie. I like going into movies blind because I don't know if I mentioned it already. I don't watch a lot of trailers. I feel like trailers spoil too much for me. So with this one, I had no idea what was happening. I had no idea what I was in for. And man, it was shocking. I don't know what I was expecting with the name The Devil All the Time. I didn't know if I was expecting like an examination of like maybe religion. All I knew was Robert Pattinson was a reverend. And so I kind of went into this. I was like, okay, maybe this is like an examination of like a cult or some like crazy religious fanatic in like rural America. It's a lot more than that. It was incredibly violent. I'm gonna tell you up front right now. I'm gonna get into a lot of spoilers with this movie. If you don't want to be spoiled, I'm gonna leave a timestamp in the description to when I kind of give my final thoughts on this movie without spoiling a lot. Again, if you want to know what's happening, I'd say pause it, watch the movie, and then come back, and this discussion is gonna make a lot more sense. Before you watch it, I've got to say, this is an incredibly violent and dark movie. There's a lot of really dark themes: suicide, rape, murder, gore. I mean, there's serial killers. It's a very, very gruesome movie. So if that's something that you're not into, I gotta say, steer clear of this one for sure. So with that out of the way, I'm gonna get into the movie now, full spoilers. So we open up this movie with Willard, who is played by Bill Skarsgård, and he's the father of Tom Holland. We get into kind of his backstory of his time in World War II. And the way they open, I mean, good Lord, they open, if you've seen the trailer, you've seen this. It opens on a man crucified, and I want to say he's like skinned alive or he's burned, and he's left on a cross to die, basically. And Bill Skarsgård and another one of his soldiers finds him, and it turns out that the guy on the cross is still alive, and so they shoot him. In another movie, this is done a bit more tastefully. They might cut away before he shoots him, or they might not show the entire body. With this, I mean, they showed everything. It's just a wide shot with the body in full focus. It is a center. You can't look away from it. And then he shoots him in the head, and you see it all. I mean, it is, talk about an intro. God damn. I was shocked. Again, I didn't know what to expect, and it really just kind of threw me in there. Anyway, let's get into a bit more of what this movie's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be calling into question a lot of the hypocrisies of religion in these southern rural towns in the 1950s and 60s. How they are almost unchecked. These people have nothing in their lives except like God and their devotion to their religion, to Christianity. And we can see how it either blinds people, it corrupts people, or they abuse the power of religion to get what they want. In particular, I want to talk about the comparison of two characters, Roy and Reverend Preston. Roy is a devout, I want to call him a fanatic of Christianity. He believes that God will protect him from everything. The first time we see him, he comes into the church that Bill Skarsgård and his mother go to. He comes into the church, and him and his brother, who's handicapped, they play a little song, they sing a little song, and then to show he has no fear and that God will protect him always, he pours spiders all over himself. And so immediately you see this guy and you're like, okay, this guy's clearly out of his mind. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's pouring spiders over himself to try and prove that God will protect him from anything, that God will alleviate him of fear. And again, having a devotion to your faith is not a problem. It's this blind fanaticism that you see really destroy Roy later in the movie. And he meets a woman named Helen. Oh, poor Helen. I feel so bad for Helen and her daughter Lenora this entire movie because they're so pure and innocent. And both of them end up dying, and it's truly tragic how both of them die. So I'll start with Helen. Helen and Roy have their child. Again, I already mentioned her name is Lenora, and they leave her with Bill Skarsgård's mother. Is technically not Helen's mother, but she treats her as if she was. The mother feels a duty to stay with Helen and try to get her married and give her a better life because Helen was an orphan. She lost her family when she was a child, and so the mother took care of her as a child, and so she feels kind of an obligation to this girl to try and help her. Anyway, Helen drops off her child Lenora with the grandmother and goes with Roy to the woods, where Roy... Oh, I need to explain this first. I'm so sorry. Roy had locked himself into a closet for, I'm pretty sure she says a fortnight, which is 14 days. And by the end of it, he claims to have heard God spoke to him. And after having heard God spoke to him, it's never explicitly said what God tells Roy. But his actions indicate that God told him that he has the power to bring people back to life. Which, again... You can be very devout to your religion, but still have common sense. You have to at some point look at this and say, okay, hold on. No one ever has brought a person back to life. Maybe I did hear God, but this is not the right thing to do. And Roy, unfortunately, he's so blinded by his religion, he doesn't think this. He instead takes his wife, Helen, to a pasture and stabs her in the neck. Again, another brutal scene. I mean, Helen is like trying to stop the bleeding. It's just pouring out. She's like trying to stop it, and then she just dies. And again, another film, this might be done a bit more tastefully. They might cut away from this. You see everything. You see it all, and it lingers on her the entire time she's struggling and dying. Anyway, after she dies, Roy just sits there, and he's like yelling like, resurrect, 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 come back to life. Like, God, give me the power to bring her back to life. And it doesn't work, obviously, because he's gone insane. And unfortunately, this is kind of it's such a strange scenario because he kills his wife, who has done nothing wrong. She's an incredibly innocent, lovable person. And I want to be angry. I want to be like, dude, what the hell is wrong with you, you idiot? You just killed your wife. You're an awful person. But during the car ride after, he's with his brother and he's in tears. He's freaking out. He says something along the lines of, I'm going to go to the police. I'm going to tell them that God told me that I had the power to resurrect my wife and that I should kill her and bring her back to life. And the brother obviously immediately tells him, what the hell are you talking about? If you go to the police and tell them that, they're going to think you're an insane man. He delivers it so bluntly. It's probably one of the funniest lines in the whole movie. Because he's just so blunt about it. He's so nonchalant about it. He's like, you understand if you go to the police, you're going to sound like a psychopath. Like, what are you doing? But the way Roy talks about it, it makes me feel bad for him almost because he's been so corrupted by religion that, I mean, he's done something unspeakable and he clearly regrets it. You can see it in his last moments as well because he abandons his brother in his car and goes hitchhiking and gets picked up by Jason Clarke and Riley Keough, who are serial killers, and probably my least favorite part of the movie. I'm going to get to that in just a second. Anyway, they pick him up, then they go and they shoot him in the head. But before they shoot him in the head, he clearly is regretting everything that's happened to his wife, and he misses his daughter. And the last thing he tells the guy before he dies is, my daughter's name is Lenora, before he's shot in the head and he's made peace with himself. For me, Roy is a case of blind fanaticism and how if you put too much investment or too much faith in religion, sometimes it gets the better of you. And by the end of it, Roy realized it did, and what he did was unspeakable. Roy never killed his wife with malicious intent. It's clear from the second that he does it that his intention was never malicious. He never was intending, he's like, I'm going to kill my wife and then I'm going to run away and I'm going to hide the body. It's clear Roy truly believed that he could have brought his wife back to life. And the second that it didn't work and he realized what he did was horrible, he has so much regret. And that makes it kind of tragic almost to see what happens to them, to see how this happens to some people in these kinds of religious settings where all they have is this religion and they invest themselves so much into it, they start to believe everything. And it's really unfortunate. Now contrast this with the actions of Reverend Preston, who the entire time I was watching it, Reverend Preston makes me sick to my stomach. He's the new reverend at the church that Tom Holland and his sister Lenora go to with their grandmother, who was the woman who was the mother of Bill Skarsgård's character. Now Reverend Preston immediately becomes an asshole, just straight up. He's an asshole because Tom Holland's grandmother cooks this liver plate for him, a chicken liver, because they're poor. They don't have enough money to afford a steak or something like that, and she makes wonderful food. And everyone in the town knows that her cooking is terrific. He even makes a point, the narrator makes a point of talking about how the grandmother's cooking is terrific and everyone loves it, especially the old reverend. But Reverend Presley, instead of enjoying it or even taking the food, he makes a point of it, saying that, look, this poor person has come to me and trying to give me the best that they can afford. They're doing their best, but they're just poor and they can't afford to get good food like everyone else. Clearly, I mean, it's clearly an insult towards the grandmother, and she even gets in the car afterwards and she's like, I've never been so embarrassed in my entire life. So they immediately establish that Reverend Preston is kind of an egocentric. Tom Holland describes him as another radio man, and his actions just keep getting worse. Lenora, the stepsister of Arvin, played by Tom Holland, Lenora eventually starts seeing him, and he begins to manipulate her and trick her into having sex with him. Again, deplorable, disgusting things. It's truly disgusting what he does to Lenora. And then eventually he impregnates Lenora, and when she confronts him about this, she says, I'm pregnant, we need to do something about this. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done anything with you. You're delusional. And he tells her to find a way to get rid of it, which, I mean, it's the 1950s. There's only one way you can really get rid of it. And unfortunately, Lenora knows it's to commit suicide. And so Lenora's about to commit suicide. She's about to kill herself. But at the last second before she's about to hang herself, she realizes this is wrong. I can't do this. I'm going to have this child and I'm going to be happy. They're all going to understand what's happening and I'm going to be okay. And right as she's about to get off the bucket, she ends up slipping and killing herself. Again, it's so tragic. It's so disheartening to see happen. Those last few seconds where she realizes that it's not what she wants. She's not going to do what Reverend Preston demands of her, and she's going to keep living her life and being strong. But then obviously she dies. And at the funeral for her, Reverend Preston doesn't say a word, which Arvin immediately takes note of. Him and his uncle, who his uncle doesn't believe in, has no faith in religion. They both take note of the fact that Reverend Preston just doesn't say anything. He completely ignores it. And so Tom Holland confronts him, and it turns out that Reverend Preston is actually having sex with numerous young girls. And Tom Holland kills him. He shoots him because of this, because of what he did to his sister and what he's doing to other girls. And in Reverend Preston's last moments, he's like on the floor, and it's clear to me that he has the fear of God in him. He's begging, please God, don't kill me, please God. And then obviously he kills him. So it's this kind of contrast between Roy and Reverend Preston that I find so fascinating. Roy was blinded by his religion, and that's what made him do what he did. He was so blinded by his devotion to Christianity and God that he believed he could do. Obviously, he believed he could do the impossible, and he regretted it. He showed regret for what he did. Meanwhile, Reverend Preston has no regret for any of his actions. To the end of it, he goes down lying to Tom Holland that he didn't do it. He denies all of it. He was clearly using religion as a facade to get what he wanted, which was to have sex with these young girls. I think this is a really interesting dynamic to explore, how corrupt religion truly can be, especially in these rural towns where religion is so king. I mean, religion comes over like the government in some cases in these small towns. And I think that's so interesting. Where this movie really falls flat, though, is the rest of the movie. That dynamic I find fascinating, but then you also have what's happening with Riley Keough and Jason Clarke, whose characters Carl and Sandy are a group of serial killers that pick up men and kill them. I understand that their purpose in the story, along with the police officer played by Sebastian Stan, is to show, first off, that everything in the story, all of these characters are all connected in some way. So, for example, Bill Skarsgård and his wife, Charlotte, they both die in the beginning. Charlotte dies of cancer, and Bill Skarsgård kills himself after his wife dies. And Tom Holland finds him, and the cop is the one who confronts Tom Holland afterwards. He finds the body of Bill Skarsgård, and he even talks to him in the car. You see it later in the movie. He's like, you just got to forget about him. You know, I never had a dad either. My dad left me. You have to forget about him and move on with your life. So that's how the cop ties in. And then the cop's sister is Sandy, played by Riley Keough, who is the other serial killer with Jason Clarke. And I get that it's kind of cool that he manages to connect everything. Again, I believe that's a product of the book. I never read the book, unfortunately. I didn't find it or have the time. But again, that's an interesting idea that everything's all connected, but it feels so bloated to add this. This movie's 2.5 hours long, and it really feels like it, especially with the scenes with the serial killer. And the cop has scenes with the mob, like some weird mafia, and he keeps talking about how he has a re-election. I found it so boring and unnecessary, especially the cop's addition to the story. I felt like he provided really nothing except that, yes, there are dirty cops who are abusing their powers, and he's the one who found Tom Holland. Like, I get that. That's like the idea is that everyone around Tom Holland in his life is incredibly corrupt in one way or another, and they're all connected to Tom Holland. But I find it so unappealing, the story of this cop. Like, he goes and like kills like 2 mobsters that he owes money to because he's a dirty cop. I remember during that scene, I was like, oh, okay, why do I care about this? Why do I care about what the cop is doing? I understand they're trying to get me to be invested in this, but I really don't care at all about this. Same with Sandy and Carl. I think Sandy is kind of interesting because she's, well, first off, she's being used as bait. Jason Clarke is forces the young men to basically have sex with his wife, Sandy, and he photographs it, and then he kills them, and he photographs that as well. Jason Clarke is sadistic. I think the narrator describes him as sick, which is absolutely true. His character is disgusting. The things that they do are probably the worst part of the movie, like in terms of the violence. They're truly disgusting, the things that they do. Like, they capture some young Vietnam soldier who's about to be deployed, and they like shoot him. Just those like 5 seconds you see of it. It's not even 5 seconds. It's really short. What did this do? What has this added for the story? I mean, this has done nothing to progress the characters at all. We already understand that Sandy wants to get out of this by now, and it felt like it was at service of a message that we already understood from both Reverend Preston and Roy to an extent, that the devil is everywhere and that God is dead. It's implied, you can imply that Roy isn't hearing God, but in fact he's hearing the devil instead, and the devil's the one telling him to kill his wife. And Reverend Preston, I don't even need to explain where the devil comes into play with him. He's having sex with the underage girls, I believe, and denying it and forcing a girl to commit suicide. Again, we understand this very clearly, and it's set up in a much more interesting way. But we keep cutting to the serial killers and to the cop, and I'm like, I don't care. I really don't care about what is going on with you guys. And by the end of it, Tom Holland, after he kills Reverend Preston, he runs away, and he goes hitchhiking and gets picked up by the serial killers, where he kills both of them. And again, in the scene, we have Sandy and Tom Holland are facing off. They're both at gunpoint to each other, and this is the point we see before Tom Holland kills Jason Clarke, that she's contemplating killing Jason Clarke right now and running away with Tom Holland. But Tom Holland kills Jason Clarke before that, and then she goes into panic mode, and they're both pointing guns at each other, and they both shoot each other. But unfortunately, Sandy's gun is loaded with blanks, so Tom Holland doesn't die, but Sandy does die. So this movie feels like a tragedy in so many ways, because so many people die in the most unfortunate ways. And that's probably the point. Again, that's probably the point of Sandy and Carl's, again, to kind of add to this tragic element of the story. But still, it's so sad to see these characters kind of at the service of nothing. The cop especially. I mean, I cannot stress this enough, how unnecessary the cop feels. The final confrontation is between Tom Holland and the cop, and I was so uninvested in it. Like, I really didn't care if what happens to the cop. I don't know if in that scene I'm supposed to feel like torn and conflicted, because Tom Holland is killing 4 horrible people. He killed an evil priest. He killed 2 serial killers. Whether or not you want to call Sandy a serial killer or not, she is involved with him and has taken part in numerous brutal murders of a bunch of men. So she is not a good person. And then he kills a dirty cop. Like, am I supposed to feel sympathy for Sebastian Stan, the cop, before he gets shot? Because I can't. I really can't. The only person I feel bad for are Lenora and Tom Holland. Tom Holland's family is dead. His father kills himself after that, and he kind of, by the end of it, he comes to terms with that. He understands that. The narrator has a line where he says that Arvin understood that his father had to be wherever his mother was, and it's kind of a bittersweet scene. You kind of he understands why he did what he did, and as sad as it is for Tom Holland to be an orphan and have lost both of his parents, he can understand why. He can really understand why, and it's sad, but it makes sense. Again, I feel no sympathy for the cop character or anything like that. So overall, I thought that this was, I'm torn, because I thought the acting was terrific. Even the characters who I thought were pointless, the cop and the serial killers, they were all very well acted. Even the dialogue, I thought the writing was really, really good. I thought everything about that was really good. Again, it might just be because it's based on a book, and you're able to take a lot of that dialogue that they already have in the book and convert it into something, into a script. And that exploration of religion is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I think that when you're talking about how religion is so double-sided, it can both blind people. It can blind people into making awful decisions, awful mistakes, and they become fanatic, almost like cultish. And it can really ruin people's lives. For example, with Roy, it ruined Roy's life and it ended up being the reason he died. But then you also can get the flip side of that, where people know how powerful religion is and they take advantage of it. They completely abuse it, like Reverend Preston did. And I think that's a really, really interesting thing that I like to see explored, because I like when people take on something as powerful as religion is. Religion is incredibly powerful. And I think when people kind of break down Christianity, which it is the biggest religion in the United States, I believe still, especially at the time in the 1950s. I mean, Christianity was everything. So for a movie to really take on that head on and really examine it, and even pose the question that God is dead and that the devil is everywhere, that's all there is a really, really unique idea. But unfortunately, it feels bloated. This movie feels bloated and filled with characters that I just don't care about. I don't care about what happens with Carl and Sandy and the cop. Like, there's such one-note characters that exist to move this idea that I already mentioned, that the devil's everywhere. And I get that, but it's not that interesting. It's not as interesting as examining the religion that they are doing with Roy and Reverend Preston and all of that. I think the religion is, the way they're examining it is so well done. But I just feel like there's too many characters that are added and subplots that are explored that are just not as interesting, which is a shame. It really is a shame, because this is a good movie overall, but it's being held back by scenes and characters that don't feel necessary. So overall, I'm gonna give this a 3.5 stars out of 5. This is a good movie. And if you can handle those really dark themes, like I mentioned, if you can handle themes like suicide, rape, murder, gore, like serial killers, if you can handle those things and you're interested, I'd say give it a try. It's still an interesting movie that has a lot to offer. So those are our movies. Yeah, that was fun. On the next one, we're going to be talking about Elena Holmes, the new movie that was released on Netflix, and I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Charlie Kaufman. I'm pretty excited to talk about the last one, especially because that one, from what I've been hearing, is an incredibly interesting movie. So I can't wait to talk about that. And that's all for this one. Thank you all so much for listening. If you are listening to this, I don't know how many people are going to listen to this, but this is a dream of mine. I've always wanted to host my own podcast. I've always wanted to run my own movie review kind of thing, and this really feels like it. It's a shame that obviously there's not as many movies coming out recently because of COVID, and I completely understand why. I plan on doing this for a long time. I don't plan on making this a short-time thing. I want to do this for a long time. So hopefully at some point next year, maybe, fingers crossed, things get better and we can go back out to the movies again, and I can talk about even more new movies coming out and talk about my experiences at the theaters. But for now, this is going to have to do, and I'm happy doing this. I'm so happy doing this, and I love this. So again, thank you all for watching. If you want to be involved in the discussion next episode, make sure to watch Elena Holmes and I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Both are Netflix exclusives, so I'm sure a lot of people have Netflix, so that's why I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be able to kind of take part in this discussion, get a little bit out of it while I'm talking about it. So if you want to take part in the discussion for the next episode, be sure to watch Elena Holmes and I'm Thinking of Anything, so that way you can get the most out of it. This really works if you watch the movie as well. That way, first off, you're not being spoiled for a movie you want to see, but also you can kind of understand, you can give your own thoughts and opinions on it. And if you have your own thoughts and opinions on The Devil All the Time or Tenet and you want to holler at me, again, we have a Twitter account, Showtime with Shannon. If you want to tell me I'm dead wrong and Tenet's the greatest movie of all time, go for it. If you want to tell me that The Devil All the Time is actually a movie about communism, I'm all for it. Just tweet at me, I'll talk to you, I'll get back to you. Thank you all so much for listening. I really appreciate this. I'm so excited to keep doing this. I can't wait to put out more episodes. And I'll see you guys next episode. Have a great day.